And welcome to People Purpose Place. This is our regular Monday night catch-up. And this week we've got a surprise guest visit, which is very exciting for us. Maddy Voiena, how are you doing, sir? Yeah, all good. All good. Maddy's going to join us with our usual co-host. Christine looks like her technology might have just dropped her out. So Christine Doan's with us as well when that drops back in. Yeah, Christine. And Darren's here as well. And as you may or may not be aware, in People Purpose Place, we try and have a long form conversation in this Monday evening chat. So the intention is to sit back and relax, get comfortable about all things housing. Understand often we talk about what do humans want from their housing, and Maddy has a particular perspective. So as an international man of mystery, maybe that would be very interesting for us to dive into that, Maddy. But of course, we also start with a check-in question where we talk to our people in the room to get everyone in the space for tonight's conversation. We are trying to be something more than just the headlines, so hopefully we set the scene for a long-form conversation where hopefully we open some ideas. We're always open to challenges, and if you feel that we've raised a subject or a topic that you want to speak out about, we absolutely invite that. And we're open to being corrected because we definitely don't know everything, and we're just putting ideas out here for a conversation to evolve our thinking about housing. Specifically for a check-in question, if we could go around the room, Christine, ladies first perhaps, what is it we need to put aside for this evening to be fully present for right now for you? You may be on mute. Still
on the technology. Well, maybe I can start and then we can come back to Christine. I've actually I've got sign language. Christine's going to go with sign language. I have, in the middle of the day after getting through the basic start of the day, I sort of got a bit of a flow patch on where I was sort of really getting through a lot of heavy lifting at work. So I noticed by the end of the day, I was sort of starting to run out of steam. So because I'm excited to have this conversation tonight, I'm definitely leaving behind the residuals of the end of my work day, and I'm excited to be here and have a chat. So I'm going to leave behind that last remnants of work and be present with everyone here tonight.
Good job. How about you, Christine? How did you go with your technology? Same thing. That's really fascinating.
So
week to the next, nothing. Maddy, anything particularly stand out for you that you want to put aside to be present for this conversation we've been eagerly anticipating?
Oh, technological issues. We'll get Christine back, I'm sure. But yeah, probably on the same wavelength as Darren, and just switching gears and going, all right, this is away from work particularly. Yeah. So yeah, just switching off the notifications, email notifications.
Yeah, and lock into this moment. Thank you very much for setting aside the time and the space to have this conversation to everybody. It is appreciated very much. Darren and Maddy had a list of questions to jump into, and Maddy, as a specialist in looking at community in the various forms that you've done, your insight is invaluable to us. So we would open the floor to you and Darren to have a bit of a chat in particular, and see where that leads us tonight. There's no questions we can't uncover, so please jump on in. Darren, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to also see whether you could give a short check-in, Rowan. So what do you have to put aside to be present for?
Yeah, so
today?
thank you. On a personal level, we're doing a bit of moving house. So in amongst the screen looks very salubrious in my background, but there's mayhem and chaos with partially packed boxes everywhere else.
Yes.
So I can put that aside for an hour. Thankfully, very, very happy to look for something other than that, and move on.
Absolutely. Christine, have you had any luck with your audio at all, or is you still using sign language?
Yeah, dead.
No. And it's almost like we can hear you talking because the little thing's coming on, but there's nothing coming our end. So, so we'll soldier on and we'll see how Christine goes with her audio, and probably so we can all get a bit of a feel for your background, Maddy. Like, I've known you for quite some time, and primarily in the business space. So I know your background has been in that visual presentation space, and we sort of met from a business point of view. And you know, I was sort of more wearing a building housing hat, and you were sort of wearing a hat around presentation and magazine and those sorts of things. And it was quickly, after we got through the normal business stuff, it was quickly clear that I had some more synergies with you on a human level as well. So we're able to quickly move past the business stuff and onto the human stuff, which I'm always seeking, is to find humans that I can certainly find some synergy with. And to sort of explain a bit more for us here as well as others, I was just interested to get a little bit more of your obviously with the last name that I struggled to pronounce, Voiena, just a little bit of your backstory and your experiences and how you've sort of experienced the world from your own lens. So if you give us a bit of introduction of your backstory, would be great to start.
Yeah, look, I think most of my sort of professional adult life spent in filmmaking and business around that area of video production. Worked in TV stations and things like that. And I think when we met, I was sort of delving out and working. I started a business magazine and got quite passionate about the impact that business can have on different areas of life and culture and progress in general. So that's been sort of my world from that angle. At the moment, I'm working within an innovation, managing an innovation fund. And yeah, my background, Brisbane boy, grew up in Brisbane, but born in Romania in the Eastern Bloc in Europe. So came over as a very young child, and we immigrated over. So I was a European wog boy growing up in South Brisbane.
Yeah, right.
With all the adjustments that come along with that, expat community. When I started school, I didn't know English, so that dynamic there was a bit of a step behind. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I guess for us as a family, after we got married, it was family was quite important for both of us. Mm-hmm. So my wife had a bit of a health scare early on in our marriage, and the long sort of recovery journey. So we really wanted to focus on the things that are important. So most of our we've been married for 14, 15 years now, and most of that journey has been pretty much single income. And we love living sort of in a city, smaller cities, if that makes sense. So we were living in Townsville City, now we're living in Newcastle City. And we love that lifestyle, love being connected. Yeah, so that's, I've had a passion even before, adult life. I've really had a passion for, where you live, the psychology of a home and what that does for you. Did happen to spend some time in some pretty rough suburbs in South Brisbane. So, it's an important thing where people live, both in that developmental stage, but also in all stages of life, having a family, and then also as you get older and dynamics change there. It's a topic that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think we sort of, when Rowan did the introduction, we sort of come up with this idea of having a conversation. What do humans want from their housing? which is actually generally what the governments are trying to get an answer to. So they're trying to find a way that the maximum amount of people can fit in the maximum amount of space. But the bit we're actually intrigued is what actually do people want from their homing? And I think your introduction is a very poignant way to start that conversation about, the fact that is it then a challenge for you as a single income household to balance that idea of, being able to ensure that your children are growing up in this really holistic environment, but then still balancing the reality of life?
Yeah, look, I think it is. I mean, we could have made some different decisions. We could have made a decision to live closer to extended family and rely on them a little bit more, but we really wanted to carve our own path. So we didn't have family in Townsville. We lived up there for about 9 years. And here in Newcastle, we don't have family. We've sort of chosen our where we live based on the opportunities and where we wanted to follow our path in life. And so I guess from that perspective, you could say, well, you've chosen a harder path. But from another perspective, I don't think people ask for much out of a place to live. I don't think they want much.
Yeah.
I think, at least for us, it's always been something simple, something, just, and that comes with affordability, that comes with accessibility, so yeah, I'm curious to sort of follow this conversation where it leads and go, okay, what do we really want and need out of life to live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there is that conversation about, wants versus needs, and then understanding what's underneath those. You got this physical stuff, which is, I want this, this, and this, but then there's also the home bit, which is a feeling, which you can't always quantify about. You could be in any sort of building, but if you have a sense of fulfillment in your home, then literally the building to some extent, has little or no impact. And I think you might have said that to me as well, that in one of your younger phases, you actually spent a bit of time going back overseas and seeing a few of those other living environments or seeing those. Have you been back overseas, in some of your early stages of life?
Yeah, definitely. And even a little bit later, like we spent a fair few weeks back in, was it 2014, so not too long ago, just traveling through all these in Europe and experiencing that. But I spent a couple of years living over there in Europe, and it just sort of really brought home the difference, particularly when you're talking about size, right? How much space do you need for the amount of people? Yeah. Small little apartments in Paris and Madrid, and entire families living in them relatively, comfortably, long term, 7-8 years. And you think to yourself, okay, so where does this concept of, your quarter acre block and 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, which I feel like has just swollen over the last 30 years in Australia, this concept. But I'm also seeing a tide, for me personally, having traveled and having had that experience, like, well, why can't that continue? And so currently we're living in a small, maybe 80 square meter apartment, 2-bedroom apartment with a 5-year-old son. And we've always sort of lived around about this size and never felt the need to look for something larger. So in that extent, my story might be representing a smaller population of the Australian population, but it is part of the discussion, how much space do you need? What are the important things?
And I think you touched on something pretty important there too. I think in 2011, Australia officially had the largest houses in the domestic world. I think they'd passed 211, 212 square meters as the average size in Australia. So you need a hell of a lot larger than that to push up, the 80 square meters you're living in. So I think you've hit it right on the head from an experience point of view. And I think maybe we'll come back to that whole context about, what's the difference between what society's been told they should have, and what can actually be suitable to be a home. So in those European areas, what sort of is there domestic houses like we know it on individual block, or are they more intense than that generally?
There's a variety of different setups there. You do have your residential blocks that are made entirely of medium to high rise, so 4 or 5 story blocks and apartments. And the benefit of that is you've got generally they're all facing towards a courtyard. You get 4 or 5 4 buildings facing in towards a courtyard where community can happen, family living. Downstairs you've got little grocers and hairdressers and newsagents and things like that. So the accessibility and you jump on the tram and head into town, you can fit so many more people in a smaller amount of space, which I think for some people that might be a little bit daunting. That might be a massive negative. Whereas for me, looking at that and just going, just the efficiencies on infrastructure, the efficiencies on, I never needed a car in Europe. It's just, and this is how we live here. But it's a struggle for us to find a place where we can live where we don't need a car. We only own 1 car. We've got the shops downstairs, cafes a street away. I jump on the tram and head down to Newcastle Beach. The tram's about 100 meters away. And it is a completely different way of life, at least that we've chosen to aim for, that is a little bit more European in that way. The other type is the sort of the German houses. You call them the German houses, but really you get the same style, the terrace houses. You get German, French, British, Victorian terrace houses. I love that. They're really charming. You get a lot of them in Sydney and Melbourne, down behind Lygon Street and those areas. And the same sort of lifestyle, just down at the corner, you've got your little community centre with your post office and cafes and stuff on every corner.
I know that this is actually one of the passionate areas. What's that, sorry?
I was just asking about car ownership in the European example. Is it fascinated with the double car household that we have here? Like, almost everyone has 2 cars and more per household. That's not such the case in Europe?
Oh, no, definitely not. I mean, and particularly depending what stage of life you're in. If you're in your younger years, so you're still studying university or starting off with your family, or you're closing in on retirement, that's and you're living in a small city in Europe, a lot of people choose not to own a vehicle. It's just not needed.
And I think that's actually
different world.
One of Rowan's bugbears is the whole idea of the impact of, to some extent, cars have had on particularly Australian cities. And I understand even in Japan, there's plenty of places where you have to actually be like seriously wealthy to be able to actually have a car in Japan, because they've actively tried to stop that transport loop, just for the vanity of increasing the livability of the cities.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the Western styles of development, we might get into this later, I'm not sure, but for us, looking where we can live, what suburbs we can live in, and that's sort of the criteria. We can walk to as many things that we access regularly as possible. And we have so many of our suburbs, particularly newer suburbs, like developments that post-1950s, they're just not walkable. It would be impossible to do life without a vehicle. So there's something to say about development there.
I think also it's funny how all these things fit together, and sometimes I don't think people always realise the flow-on ramifications of the stuff. So I noticed in some regional areas in particular, people still get in the habit, because the store is far enough away, that they get in the habit of getting in the car and travelling somewhere. And I noticed something, just as an observation, is when I'm in, say, capital cities in the inner ring, when you look around, you don't always see a lot of obese people. And I think that's because of the fact people are inclined to walk somewhere rather than necessarily, I notice it in some small cities, the percentages of people you just observe in the street that are obese, because everyone's just hopping in a car to go somewhere. Like no one is just walking down the local store, they're going to still hop in their car and drive the 2 kilometres because it's just too far, as you said, to be able to be just walking around. And I suppose one of the things that we had to talk about was, do you think that urban sprawl has been something that's been a benefit for Australia?
Oh, I mean, now you heard my perspective, so it's a big no for me. I lived in a smaller town in Europe for about 8 months, right? And even as a newcomer, within about 3 or 4 months, you couldn't walk down the street, which is I needed to walk about 800-900 meters to get to the center where the stores were. You couldn't get there without talking to 2 or 3 people. So, yes, there's that movement component that we're made to move. Movement creates what do they say? Motion creates emotion. It's good for you. There's that element, but there's also the community element. You're constantly engaging with community, walking down the street, and it's partly what when we moved down here for work about 4 years ago, and it's partly what I miss about Townsville as well. We lived in the Dalgety building there in the city, and on a Sunday morning, same thing. You couldn't go down the shops or walk through the markets without just connecting with people that just bumping into people. So I think there's something to be said about small. They call them quartiers, small suburbs. Small blocks, and they're made up of like 4 blocks, and you end up knowing everyone, and that element of community. We may be missing out on here. We've got our cul-de-sac, and your neighbours and all that. Increasingly, I feel like people are viewing their home as the sanctuary, as their space, and so the tendency for that more open connection with those around you. I'm not sure if that's. I can see that people want it. I'm not sure if that's being achieved. It may be in some areas it's being facilitated really well by just the way that a suburb is built.
It's pretty rare, isn't it?
I think we hear a lot about the availability of technology and platforms to be connected. We have all these connection opportunities, but I think the truth is we've never been more lonely. The rising mental health issues and the disconnect that we have with all the time we spend on screens, driving a device, getting home to plug into the next screen. Exactly what you're talking about, Maddy, about walking down the street and interaction in your neighbourhood. It's an incredibly intimate, beautiful thing just to have a conversation with someone with no particular agenda. The weather, what passing the time of day. But we don't seem to be allowing that at all in example we see in Australia. And I think we're much poorer the community for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I can imagine how some people would be like, that's what I want. I don't want, people to know who I am, and there might be I have when it's speaking with friends, and the way they choose to, their choices they make when they're looking at housing, their home, where they're living, and some of them react a bit from that, and they're like, I don't like it when people can be part of my life and ask me how you do it. They know what I am, and my reputation sort of, or my who I am is at the, how would you put it, the level. Like I can see that people maybe want I don't think we need to hark back to, it used to be like this, and we used to be able to walk down the street and connect with each other. And technology might be a big answer, but I think this individualistic approach to homing and housing is leading us down a path where we're missing out on something crucial when it comes to connectedness. And we need to recover something to fill that. That component of community and social connection. We're social beings, and it might not look like this picture that I've painted of a cute little European city. It might be something different. And this is why I'm excited by what you guys are doing at People Purpose Place, because you're working on trying to discover, okay, what could that look like?
Yeah.
What could it look like to rediscover, reimagine some of that connectedness? Christine's back. I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Sensational.
Wow. Well, all I had to do was jump on again, get off and jump on again. But
so what are the IT people saying?
I have a really pressing question. May I ask it?
Go.
Yeah, go for it.
Hit me.
I'm so interested in your observation that people in smaller towns are less obese. And this was something that I really noticed all the years I was doing my athletic training. What's that?
That was Darren's observation. But go on.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but the interesting thing was that in Europe, what I saw, particularly in Germany, was that some of these older women, they were real, brick shithouses. They were big, but they were full of muscles because they rode their bike to the supermarket every day because they didn't have enough refrigeration at that point to do anything else. And they were so used to shopping daily for fresh that they just wouldn't stop pedaling their bikes to buy their groceries. And that turned them into not svelte teenagers, but really strong women. It was quite impressive. And what do we do in Australia? I mean, in a place like Atherton, where everybody has to have a car because you can't live in rural Australia without a car. There's so many. I mean, we've just been watching the weight grow and grow and grow. And the loneliness doesn't shrink because people get bigger. It gets bigger too. And I don't know what to say about that. Is it the car? Is it the fat? Is it the diet? Is it the fact that we live in a society that is really not very healthy? I mean, I was born in America. It way worse there. Australia's utopia. But we've followed many of these same trends. What do you have to say about all that? Because it seems to me that you like living more like a European.
Yeah, you definitely could say that. And you've touched on a few different elements there. And it's incredible to see. I've come to truly believe that where you live in the context of your city, town, locality, and how you live, the psychology of your home dictates and permeates so much of your life. How kids grow up, if they grow up, in a semi-anxious state, or if they grow up, worried about their neighbors because they've had break-ins, or whatever it may be. There's so much of that, and you just touched on a few elements there, and here, going an event that sort of hit me right between the eyes. As I said, I grew up in Brisbane, got a whole bunch of friends in Brisbane. About 12 or 15 years after I left, there was a friend of mine, which I was unfamiliar, quite close with when I was in Brisbane. I think it was just on the onset of the Trump elections, with Hillary and Trump going into those elections, and they just it became quite visible that polarization that was happening within politics sort of started spilling over into, and I began to see some of my friends also adopt or take sides and adopt some views in different in different perspectives. And I was just thinking about all of this and just thinking, how do we, and a little bit protected from this, particularly living in Newcastle, in Townsville, because of that. We've got that sense of community. I'm like, why am I not feeling this? And I'll talk to some of my friends in other cities, and now that I've got friends in Sydney and other places, and there's this this trust deficit that has continued within politics and within community, where's that coming from? You know, and for me, I can't help but connect it to this push towards individualism, this increasing sense of disconnectedness that we have from each other. And I don't know what to do about it personally, because coming from a Romanian background, coming from an Eastern European background, tight-knit communities, large families, everyone was in your business, everyone, you know, I rebelled against that, right?
Yeah.
I wish you still had some of it.
Yeah, I do wish I still had some of it. But probably thrown out of the baby with the bathwater with that one. But you know, at least for us, we were like, no, none of that. I want to be able to choose what I want, and I don't want to be criticized for it. You know, I don't want to be blueprinted by my relatives because of, you know, how they saw me when I was 5 years old. I want to be spoken to with a sense of potential and trust, and you know, so there are elements of that dynamic which I feel like we're swinging, and so much of it has to do with, you know, in the old country and in the old world, half your cousins lived in the same town.
Yeah.
You had multiple generations in the same house. It was so connected. So I understand people wanting to. I understand the draw to individualism.
Yeah. And
Let me out of
seeing this.
It's a real let me out of here.
This. Yeah, and it's like, cool, I just got especially I'm an introvert, so it's like, just give me a book, give me a cup of coffee. But even for myself, I'm like, this isn't good. I'm seeing this I'm wrongly convinced that it's connected. To this dynamic, but I do feel we need to find our way back to a way of connecting with one another, and that is the next, you know, the next thing. Okay, how do we now come back? Because I think if we do continue down this path, it's not going to. Yeah, Christine.
Maddy, you are so speaking straight to my heart. Why did I come to Australia? I've told people so many different stories. Oh, I love tea and I didn't like coffee. Now everybody in Australia drinks coffee. I still drink tea. You know, I've made up all these funny little one-liners. Well, what'd you come to Australia for? What do you like about the place? You know, things like that. But in fact, why did I leave America and why did I love Australia? And my first footfall in the Sydney airport, I went, this is where I belong. And that was 50 years ago. You know, Sydney Airport wasn't very flash 50 years ago. But what I've understood since is that Australia is a far more collective society than America is. And one of the things that I find most refreshing and most lovable and most positive about Australia is that it is a step further into collectivism, just from its founding, from its history, from the geography, even from the demography. There are all these aspects that make us more collective than Americans, and yet we're still so separate. So what are we going to do with those Yanks? You know, we got to find, well, yeah, but we need to find some answers in this country where it's possible to find the answers. Because I think one thing you're pointing out, Maddy, is that it's a bigger stretch in some other parts of the world, and certainly in the US it is. So how do we in Australia take a leadership role, even in the smallest possible way, to start to bring people, do exactly what you said, Maddy, bring people back into community?
And I think one thing that's interesting is that we become very passionate about this space, but I think the way we live is actually really, really crucial to this.
To Maddy's point.
Yeah, and I think we have, and I wrote down some notes while you were talking, and one of the things which is interesting is when you talk about the part of Australia that you fell in love with when you first came here, Christine,
Yes.
the housing itself was designed for interaction. So an old Queenslander had a front veranda and a rear veranda, and you had to walk
a side
out,
veranda
and
and
a side
a
veranda.
place out the back where you could build a fire and sit around the campfire.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think that was almost the homing was enabling community to have a better sense of community. And then over time, we've developed this individual culture, which has meant even the housing design is now very, we call it internally focused in its design. So it's designed to push you inside rather than let you go outside, because we've conditioned the spaces. So it's almost like a perfect storm of elements, which has created more and more distance from everyone and a sense of individualism. So it's almost like our design and the way we live is actually counterintuitive to the underlying element. And I find it also interesting. One other bit that I wrote down is I find it intriguing that as humans, whatever we don't have, we seek. So it's funny that, you know, as soon as we have too much of group, we run to individual. And then when we have too much individual, we say, geez, I long for that idea of us all being back in the one spot. But, and I think that's an expression of what you said, Maddy, you know, like, but there's still a sense of us that is always coming back to community.
And
but we've still forgotten how. So how do we remember how, Maddy? How do we remember? That's a tricky one.
Yeah. I like what you shared, Christine. I appreciate you sort of sharing your views on coming to Australia, because there are still some of those really amazing elements here. You know, just that concept of the barbecue, the Aussie barbecue.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of my friends, their attraction to some of those, you know, your quarter acre block with 4 bedrooms and things like is that you can have a fire pit in the backyard. You can have everyone over, and entertaining is like at least for a lot of our friends, it's a key part of what they want their home to facilitate. Yet I think this discussion is bringing to light that increasingly there's some, maybe there's some of those practical challenges of, okay, when you're looking at an investor building homes, they're not going to have those things as a priority.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, maybe when we're looking at policy and we're looking at development, maybe those aren't the priorities, you know. But you're apart from, you know, even with these cultural elements of like wanting a house that can facilitate hospitality, wanting, you know, wanting to get together and just have a barbecue, even with those elements, I'm still feeling that at least within the people that I know, barbecues are happening less.
Yeah.
Right.
If that makes sense. No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too busy. Too stressed out.
Too busy.
Something.
Yeah.
Too busy, too stressed out, too something.
Yeah.
And I think that polarization.
My wife. Go on.
That polarization I think is a part of that. But I think to break down those things, it's almost like we need a place where we can come together as community. At the moment, there's all of these barriers being put in the way, and I wonder whether even, you know, social media might even, although it's an enabler, it's also a disabler. Certainly our housing is disabling us from having a sense of community. So it's almost like there's all of these things which are stopping us come together at a time that we most need to be finding a way back to our humanity rather than running away from it.
I guess what we would say with People Purpose Place is that it's not the perfect solution for all people, but it's allowing good design, good functionality, that connectedness to occur organically from within the home, rather than having to plug in an app or see a counsellor or whatever to have that level of connectedness. Maybe we can facilitate that with good intention, good design, good agreements, and certainly can be fostered. And, you know, 2 different families will take different levels of advantage of that. Some will remain intergenerational connected and have all the cousins and everyone remain in the neighbourhood, and that's beautiful, and that might be how they use that capacity. whereas other families and households will not use it maybe to the same level, which is fine. But if we just put forward an alternative to running down the road being more and more isolated, I think would be a good start.
Oh, absolutely.
Does that sort of ring true for you, Maddy?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And I like how you mentioned those different elements, the design, the intent, and agreements, because it is, you're looking at, the actual building, but then you're also looking at that cultural component and go, okay, how do we engage, and post-internet, people engage differently, they connect differently. So what does that look like? What is living, living that relationship of community that's generated? What does that look like next? I think we have an opportunity to create a respectful, a balanced. I'm going to go on a tangent here. When I say balanced, I think one of the key elements of our world today probably came up in the French Revolution, is when those three pillars of democracy or modern democracy were established. Liberty, equality, they called it fraternity back then. I'll probably say community. So those particularly those two elements of liberty and equality, then you've got the individual liberty for me to choose. That's the individualistic aspect. I'll be able to choose and have my, create my own path in life, choose what I want to do with my life, choose to succeed, to aim for success and that drive. And then you have that equality, which is like, that equal opportunity. Everyone gets to have a go, that Australian ideal. And so you can't follow your individual liberty at the cost of other people's opportunities.
Yeah.
And there's a balance between those two. And, somewhere in that balance, we see a healthy, flourishing community come to life, right? And so I love those ideals and how they work together. And I feel like that element of equality, we're all in this together. We're all family, you're part of the clan. Don't do anything to damage the clan. And hang on a minute. Who am I? What's my place? I want to make my own decisions about what is right and wrong, or what I feel is right and wrong. If we can get a better balance, then perhaps, what we saw in the previous generation of collectivism, if you want to call it that, I think we can aim for that, and I think can achieve it. Things won't just return to the same.
No.
We'll probably have other lessons to learn.
Yeah.
But I do think it will look better. So I look forward optimistically to a time where we can regain some of this connectedness with the lessons learned of past generations, and really get a better sense of that balance, and we can engage respectfully and just in a way that fosters and builds community, rather than bring in some of those issues which we call, often cause fallouts, or you have a relationship with someone, it's we fell out or whatever. I think we can get better at that, as a community.
I actually think I think maybe with the tension that's going on now is enough. Like now might be enough pressure that a lot of people are feeling that discontent of modern society's individualism. Like I think and I wrote down while you were talking, honoring an individual but promoting community. So I think there is a sense that we still feel like we need to have our sense of ourselves. But I do now feel like there's enough things going on in society that I think enough people have got to the place you have, which is what we have, which says, like, we still need to regain real connectiveness and acceptance and all of those things, which is being heavily polarized. And I think we need the tools. I think you're 100% right. I don't think that happens by, doesn't just occur. Like, I think we actually need some tools. And one of the things we've been working on quite a lot is to actually help groups, and we're having that today where, the Latin word familiar is actually household, where a household can actually have the tools to work better as a group. Because at the moment, we don't necessarily, we maybe have forgotten those tools, like they're not so readily available like they were. We don't even know how the pyramid's built. So how are we going to figure out how we should be working better as small, intimate groups? So I think we've got a lot of learning to do there. And maybe some of the learning is what you've already experienced, like if in community you were forced together, what did you learn from those experiences? What didn't you like?
Yeah, we can learn from this stuff. We don't have to repeat the same mistakes that a collective community have sort of imposed upon us in the past. Yeah. And we can create something, like we have the onus is on us to create something that's better. And to some extent, I feel the urgency of the need is that we need to achieve it for the mental health of people. We are social beings. It needs to happen. We need to find a way to help our teenagers navigate this world where everything you could ever know is at your fingertips. Bo Burnham, can I interest you in everything all of the time? This world.
Good point.
And it's hard for us. For me, I'm an older millennial, and for older generations, because we got our feet in both camps. But I think it's incumbent on us to figure it out and to go, okay, what's that going to look like? Right? What is community going to look like now? The world's never gone, like, you can't rewind the clock. No. The world is now a different world. We're connecting differently. Yeah. So let's have a look at and experiment with. And this is why I'm loving the approach, from you three on the way that you're approaching these conversations around community, trying to identify, okay, what could it look like? Trying to imagine what could a community look like, both from this cultural aspect, which I feel like we've dominated this conversation. It's mostly about this cultural aspect, but even from a physical design space, we can't connect if we're constantly in our cars.
Now,
did you have a point there, Christine? Too?
I have a question. Look, Maddy, I just want to say, though, before we go any further, how inspired I am by the authenticity of your presentation of yourself and your feelings and your experiences and what your experiences have led to. I'm just so inspired because you've thought so deeply about this and felt so deeply into it and have had such different experiences that have brought you to different conclusions. I'm just thrilled that we've got you on. You have to come back. We start with that. You must come back because we've hardly covered anything. Yeah, we've already been here for most of an hour. So,
sorry, Rowan.
Yeah, no. I think this is probably a very, very, very important conversation, and the next one will be equally important with you. So here's my question about that. You may be a late stage millennial. I'm an absolute 1949 baby boomer from America. I mean, seriously, you don't get more baby boomer than that. And did the whole 60s hippie California, the whole bit. So here's my question. We already started then thinking we can revolutionize the world. We can have closer relationships. We think everything is too, already back in the 60s, was too frayed. The fabric of society was already frayed. But I was enthusiastic at that time because you don't have much experience about how well I could do that. And now at 73, I can tell you, I think I could help, with Darren's help, get a house design that works. I think I could probably pay for it because I've got my hand up as an investor. But could I personally actually expand into a space where I was collectively living with others, where I had my own strict privacy, but we had rules around how we interact together? I am scared shitless of that idea. What's your suggestion? Should everybody start with that sort of, oh, this is going to be hard? or should everybody? Should I try to move my uncertainty about my own capacities into a more positive frame? What do you suggest, Maddy?
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, what you're saying to me just then, it goes to show how deep these things are.
Oh, they're deep.
You know,
These are deep.
you know, if you ask someone, hey, would like, you know, for me, I'm sort of the generation where I still have the opportunity to move in with my, you know, in-laws or parents. And then you ask someone, would you move in with your parents? And, you know, one couple will be like, yeah, sure, not a problem. We'll move in while we're renovating a house or something. And then you'd have another couple that'd be like, no, I need my space. Our relationship with the parents would not last if we moved into, you know. So these types of things, and, you know, that's just one slice example, but these types of things are going, would you live in a different arrangement? You know, if the current arrangement is not suiting us, and if we're looking at some pretty dire predictions on the horizon, where, you know, and Rowan, Darren, you'd probably be able to correct me on this, on the number of women looking into retirement over the next decade, and the homelessness that's expected in this area. I mean, if we're looking at some of these really frightening realities because of how we live, I mean, what do you do when we have such deep handbrakes and blueprints which go, no, I need this type of space to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But then that, whatever that looks like, has some systemic instabilities in it, which down the road they become unsustainable, and you end up with people on the street.
Yeah.
Not everyone can.
Not everyone can pick it up for sure. But one thing is for absolute certain, and you touched on it just there, if you recognize that you have something that's not working now, change what path you're on, for God's sake. Don't sit there and do nothing about it. If we're going to build more houses because that'll fix a problem, we are delusional. The last 1 million homes didn't fix the problem. Another 1 million homes won't fix the problem. Like it's just, that thinking is just madness.
They say there are 1 million empty homes in Australia.
Hmm.
You know, talking about millions, there's 1 million empty homes. Well, wouldn't that stop the housing crisis right there if you could identify half of them and put people in them somehow? But it's not the stuff that's lacking. That's why I say I can do a design. I might be able to pay for a house. Have I got the inner capacity?
Mm.
And I think that's a little bit why we, you know, in the time that we've spent in this space, you notice in People Purpose Place, the places actually last for a reason, because I think as humans, you just talked about innovation. I think we can find an answer to what that might look like, but until we do the people work and understand the purpose behind what we're trying to achieve, then the property is almost superfluous. And I think you might have even mentioned that today when we were just having a brief chat, Maddy, that you know, you knew someone who was a developer who was being altruistic and thinking, I'm going to build this specifically for older women to move into, and then it turned out they couldn't get it. And then ultimately it just went to young professionals who really liked the location and the living style. And I think that's primarily because each of us, one of the first things is, and maybe this comes on to one of our last conversations about societal change, but I think that all is an individual ownership of that as well. Like, you're asking questions now. The hard part is, if you're in a desperation mode to find housing, you'll live anywhere, won't you? But in actual fact, we don't need change at the crisis level. We actually need change in the next level up, where we're having this conversation and going, look, I'm a bit fucked in the head, but we're going to have to work through my own internal reservations, because I know there's a space that we can find that's really valuable for our total society and myself and our children to come as well. So it's a really difficult thing. And you coming from a marketing background, would understand that societal change is not something that happens quickly.
What a beautiful response, Darren. I love that.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how something like your house is so deeply connected with our psychology? You know, from an aspect of of what the home represents for someone. And I keep returning to this. I don't know why, but this aspect that your home is your sanctuary, your home is the place where you can sort of return to. I feel like in many areas of life we are challenged. You go to work and you're challenged to do your task and to grow and to push and you're in. We're confronted and we are pushing and we're
A refuge.
And just, okay, this is my space, right? And what we're asking here is to go, your space, change that, right? The one thing that one solace, the one anchor that you go back to every night and just switch on Netflix and tune out and relax. And this is my pad. Don't interfere upon this. Is the one thing that, and we're going, hey, so, if I put my innovation hat on, I would say, like these conversations are so amazingly helpful. I think you have to start with empathy. I'm a big fan of design thinking. You have to start with empathy. You have to start with inquiry and trying to understand, okay, what is it? And I'm talking to Christine as you were sharing there. It's like, you can see the need for this change, but personally, you don't know if you would have, I guess, the courage to jump in and do it. So I would love to, delve into that and probably do that at scale with a lot of people and go, okay, what are those things that are really important to you, that define your home and where, what that means to you. And hopefully that inquiry and exploration will lead to the innovative solutions that we're needing. Because I'm sure that part of that core need in everyone's life is community.
Oh, no doubt. And, we've had some of these workshops where there's no doubt that has been reflected. And I think also one thing is, as humans, we've become so thinking, like a lot of those people are thinking about all of these things. So they're thinking about, I need this and I want that and I should have this and whatever. I think we also need to stop occasionally and feel into those things, which is, as an old white man, that's the last thing that I want to do. But but I'm learning that I need to, I need to. So what does a home that honors an individual but develops community feel like?
That's the question. That's the magic bullet question. That's
a great question.
I think that's probably worth another whole episode right there, because
I think so too. I think we need Maddy back on and we need to delve into this more deeply.
Yeah.
Would you do it, Maddy? Would you come back?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
This is just beautiful.
Definitely. I'm enjoying these conversations. Yep.
Great.
And, we talked about at the start, how quickly these things fly around.
Yeah, that, believe it or not, that's an hour.
Look, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I know this is a conversation sort of with the slightly different demographic, but for me, I'm looking at for just our experience on a family level as well, and facilitating community for my son and for us as a family. So it's relevant to every stage.
Relevant to everyone.
Absolutely. And we sort of, when we started this within People Purpose Place, we're developing this idea that people will approach this concept from very different directions. You mentioned about, older women as being a demographic or a group. I honestly believe that young families who are trying to find that balance between how do I have a sense of ourselves as a family, but still develop, what we need as a community. So you might form, one of these reasons why these conversations need to continue with yourself is understanding, what are the needs of a family. And we know that those development years are so powerful for children. So to be in a situation where both parents are forced to go out and work to, be this pretend thing that we all call successful, while our children might be at home, is something that's worth getting our heads around and getting back to the core ideals of what are we actually doing all this for.
Yep, exactly.
That's awesome.
Specifically just to upset people sitting on the couch and tuning out in solitude watching Netflix. I think that's there's a time and a place for that, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you think, touching on Darren's point of parenting young kids, you have this small window of time where they'll actually listen to you. They soon get to teenagers and don't want anything to do with you. And so while you've got that small window, setting that up for success to have the best possible interaction, the best home environment, so that those relations can thrive is incumbent on all of us. The village should be raising that child. And these examples in successful homes where we're designing for success, and we'll fail, we'll fall over, we'll get stuff wrong along the way. But if we set ourselves up for aspiring to a successful home where we can have beautiful interactions and we're thinking about that, I'm pretty excited about that as the potential future for our communities.
100%. And I think also maybe I think it might be poignant because of where we've got to sort of with timing, but we had 3 or 4 other questions to pose to Maddy, and we didn't quite get it. So that means you've got to come back now, unfortunately, whether you like it or not. But I thought maybe, just as an idea, could we maybe have a checkout? If we could just we feel about our conversation today and some closing comments. Rowan, do you want to maybe start on a checkout?
Yes, absolutely, to model the process. Thank you very much for time spent today for everyone. I'm very grateful for this conversation. I know that it's a contribution to the overall conversation. It's not a beginning or end in itself. But thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the time spent on this topic tonight.
Pleasure.
Beautiful.
Awesome. I might go next if that works.
Sure.
I have. We didn't actually cover any of the topics that I thought we'd get to, which is pretty normal. But I actually feel quite inspired. Like this, we've acknowledged this road that we're going on is not an easy one. So sometimes it's just good to know there's other people in the world who get it and understand the super importance of hard work in this space. So I feel thankful and have a lot of gratitude for the conversation tonight, because it gives me some confidence that there's reasons why it's important that we continue to go. So thank you. Christine?
Yeah, I'm feeling very inspired. This morning I had a wonderful experience of a group of 3 and 4. It ended up being 4 and then 5, of really collaboratively tossing ideas around and really coming up with a lot of very good, actually we got some work done as well, not just ideation. And I just feel like this whole session has just been so heartwarming and so full of hope for somebody like myself who thinks this is a great idea. I've thought so my whole life, but can I do it? And so I'm feeling very reassured and very positive. Thank you all.
Awesome.
Great.
Maddy, did you want to?
Yeah, look, likewise. I've really enjoyed this. It's made me think. You all have challenged me also on I guess why I view these things the way that I view them. And yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to be part of the conversation.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Maddy. And thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, Maddy, superstar guest. Thank you to People, Purpose, Place, Christine and Darren. We will check in every Monday evening. So next Monday we'll have another conversation. The topic we're going to speak to temporarily escapes me, but it'll be fascinating, no doubt.
And then I'll have to book Maddy back in again.
That's
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
ASAP.
Absolutely.
As soon as he's willing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maddy. Thank you, Christine, Darren. Namaste.
Appreciate your time.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
See you later.